My wife and I, decided to go to Jamaica on a vacation over the Christmas holidays one year, and liked it, and they kept coming back. So we started going there on vacations during the winter, and the very first time we went, we found that there was an exhibition of the Jamaican Intuitives, and we attended it and became very attracted to the work, and that's really how we got started. The exhibition that we attended, we were staying the very first time in the city of Ocho Rios, and there's a gallery in Ocho Rios named Harmony Hall, and every year they have an exhibition of the Intuitives. And I found out about it because there happened to be a magazine on the news rack while we were there, the Jamaica Journal, that on the cover of it, it says, "The Intuitives of Harmony Hall," and then it explained about these artists, and then I found that the exhibition happened to be going on during the time we were there, so we went over there, and a couple of the artists were there, but we didn't really meet them so much as really sort of take a good close look at the work and found it very intriguing, and one thing led to another after that. I was never involved in collecting the work or really giving it that much focus. However, during a trip to Europe, I attended actually the very first year it opened, the opening of the year of the Musée d'Art Brut in Lausanne, which is a museum dedicated to self-taught artists, or as they're called in Europe, the Art Brut, and found the work very, very, very interesting, very original, very much reflective of the inner world of the creators. So I had some exposure to it, but very, very limited. And so, but maybe I think that sort of helped attune me to put me in the right frame of mind the day we went over to Harmony Hall. The art consisted of paintings and sculptures and some spiritual musical instruments at that exhibition. And I think we bought 3 or 4 works of art that particular time, and one of them was a painting by Albert Ardwell, and it was a painting of the birth of Christ. But what was intriguing about it is that it was set in Jamaica. And so I said, hey, this guy is doing a very, very interesting thing. He's taking Bible wisdom and he's making it his own. He's setting it in his own country, and he's retelling the tale in his own words, in his own country. And I thought that was a very wonderful artistic idea, to be able to take a subject and not just deal with it literally, but rather to take it and roll it around in your mind and refabricate it in a way that tells the story the way you would like it to be told. So that was the very first painting that we bought of Jamaican Intuitives. I think we also bought a couple of sculptures of Woody Joseph, and they were quite remarkable because one of them was a figure, sort of from the neck up, and it was done in a very sparse way with very minimal sort of carving style, and it was done and it was black, and it just seemed to be almost like archetypal in the type of way he did the carving. Very, very, very secure in the way he did it. Very, very evocative and not overdone. Just sort of the touch of a master to be able to, with very few, actually little working, to be able to render it in such a complete fashion. What we felt was the artists were very much pure artists. They were able to take their own ideas and to give them very vivid expression using their own language. And none of them were copying any of the others. They all had invented their own language that was appropriate for what they wanted to project. So we felt we were encountering very strong art. At the same time, we were encountering art that was a sort of a window to the culture. And so we'd already sort of figured out that we would be coming back to Jamaica, and over time, we felt that this was a very good way to sort of get beneath the surface of the culture instead of just being there as tourists. The artists are a product of their time, and they're a product of their a lot of different particular circumstances. They're a product of their time in the sense that Jamaica this very year celebrates its 50th anniversary of independence. So it's a young nation. It's in the time I've been collecting, which was about half of that period. It was coming out from under a colonial system of government, independent system of government, and so the people themselves were in a state of figuring out who they are as a people, coming out from under colonialism. And at the same time that was going on in Jamaica and in the United States, a very important recognition of the importance of Africa within the African diaspora. In Jamaica and in the United States, the roots of Africa had been sort of passed over and in some ways suppressed within the culture, within the diaspora culture. And so in Jamaica that was going on at the same time. People were trying to figure out how do we relate as members of the African diaspora? How do we relate to now that we're in a country where we're the majority and we have self-rule? How do we sort of go back and sort of construct an identity for ourselves that allows us to have the capacity to exercise this new power and this new opportunity? The artists that we come to know over the years were witnessing all of that, in some cases participating in it in others, but they were all working out their own individual solution. They weren't, none of the artists, some of the artists we collected were Rastafari, and they were basically depicting the tenets of Rastafari using the sort of regular icons of Rastafari, of His Majesty and the Lion of Judah and the other normal symbols. But others were sort of influenced by that, but took different takes. And so we were witnessing development of a sort of self-identity within a country all during this time. And we were witnessing individual artists coming up with their own individual solutions to that. The work itself is a testament to the creativity of the humble mind. All of the artists that we collect and documented over the years with audio tape and videotape and photography and other things, all of them were very, very humble people. None of them came from a privileged background. They all came from very meager means, and in many cases still lived with very meager means. But they had the capacity, the inner capacity, to look within and to come up with metaphoric ideas that expressed the sort of visions that they were caught up with, and to do it in an original way. So it's raw creativity, untaught, not influenced by museums, not influenced by a knowledge or any kind of a training in art, but simply the capacity that's probably innate in all of us to be able to come up with in a very creative way with their own visual language and their own metaphoric language, and do it in a way that really represents strongly the ideas that they want to convey. So it's strong art done by strong artists. I did a documentary called Messengers of Zion, and there was an exhibition of our collection in Washington, D.C. And we showed at that particular museum, they showed the documentary along with the art in the same room. And one of the reviewers, a reviewer from the Washington Post, said, I watched the video and I got it. He said, I was able to be transported to this locale, transported into their life. He said it made them looking at the work infinitely stronger. So yeah, being able to transport yourself even through video into their life for a few minutes, it really does help. You understand what their intentions are, what their circumstances are, and you get a bit of an idea of sort of the intense spiritual background that many of them come from. With most of the artists that we dealt with, that we collected fairly seriously, we had interactions with them for over a period, maybe once or twice a year, or once every 2 years or so, over a period of 15 or 20 years. So we came to know them personally very, very, very well in many cases. What we know about the artists is that in most cases, the reason they're good artists is because they're original thinkers. They share a lot of common ideas, a lot of common wisdom within Jamaica. The wisdom that was handed down by Marcus Garvey of the importance of being your own person, the importance of standing up for yourself, the importance of joining others as standing up for yourself jointly, the importance of establishing your ties with Africa and reestablishing your sense of self-worth. They share that idea. They share the idea of the spiritual life of the earth itself. The idea that the spirit world cohabitates not just in our soul, but in the soul of the animals and the plant life and the physical rocks and structures. So they share that idea too, and they share Bible wisdom, and they share a sense of Jamaican history. So they share a lot of things. But what happens is that all of those ideas that they know about jointly, it goes into their individual heads, and they have a different. Each one of them has a different mixture inside their head, and so when it comes out, it's unique. It's their take on all of this stuff. One of the truly great artists of the Western Hemisphere, Everall Brown, for instance, and just as a quick example, what he did was he's always been a mystic. I mean, quite literally a mystic, a guy who had the power to sort of see and foresee and have inner visions. And his family noticed it when he was a very small child. And so in the course of his life, he met one of the founders of Rastafari, a man by the name of Ebert, and sort of joined him for a while and sort of absorbed his wisdom. But he didn't follow that path. The path he followed was a little different path. Rastafari, for those who think about it or are exposed to it through reggae music and other things, what it is, it's a belief in really two central beliefs. One is that Haile Selassie, who was the emperor of Ethiopia in the early part of the 20th century, is really a returned Messiah, and that secondly, it's the obligation of people in the diaspora, in Jamaica particularly, to return to Africa, and hopefully to return to go back to Ethiopia. Although none of the African Jamaicans ever came from Ethiopia, they all came from Central Africa and West Africa. But nonetheless, that's the idea. And so Everall Brown, for instance, heard that idea, but he looked at it a little differently. He says, well, tell me more about the religion of Ethiopia. And he found out that the religion of Ethiopia is a Christian religion. It's the Ethiopian Orthodox Church. So his idea was, coming from a native Baptist tradition in Jamaica, his idea was, well, I'm not going to follow the path of believing that Haile Selassie is a returned Messiah. I'm going to follow the path of taking up the religion that he practices and become Ethiopian Orthodox myself. Now, there wasn't any Ethiopian Orthodox religion in Jamaica. There were no priests, no trained priests. So he simply set up in Kingston on the Spanish Town Road his own church. He simply decided, I will become a self-ordained Ethiopian Orthodox minister, and he did. And in so doing, he decided he needed icons for his church, And so he would paint wonderful icons of his church surrounding the interior of this small church that he had that had a dirt floor. And he decided he needed spiritual musical instruments, and so he created spiritual musical instruments of guitar-like instruments, one instrument, a bass instrument, various drums, instrument for 4 persons, and actually 4 instruments in one, a harp section, a drum section, a guitar section, and a thumb piano section. And so he did all these things and created staffs, spiritual staffs that he used in his practice, in his spiritual practice. So the beginnings of him as an artist was to create works that would serve the ministry that he had taken upon himself. And there are other artists that I met that did the same thing. Elijah, and what she did was she decorated her yard and her church with various objects to display her spiritual ideas. So in often cases, that's the impulse. The first impulse is a spiritual impulse, and they see themselves as a messenger, and they see themselves as having a role to be able to expose the ideas that they have come to believe are important spiritual ideas to others, and that's how a lot of them get started. And then over time, what happens over time is that somebody takes it from the world of art, takes notice of them, and then they sort of see all this and this incredible visual expression, totally original, totally the work of a true artist, strong true artist. They then sort of continue to make their original works, but then also sort of make additional works because they get a demand for them, request for them from people who aren't really followers of their spiritual ideas necessarily, but simply people who see them as artists and want them to be able to have a record or an example of these wonderful works. So that's kind of the path that often takes place. The really good ones, the ones who are really true artists, they never change. The works that they're creating for other people are simply the same kind of wonderful thing. Each of them produce their work in their own home, or as you call it in Jamaica, in their own yard. None of them have studios that they go to, but most of them lead very, very simple life, as most Jamaicans do, and are able to self-sustain themselves through occasional sale of the works of art. One end of the spectrum, you have an artist like Leonard Daly. And Leonard Daly is under no time clock. He's not producing work for anybody but himself. And that's why he's a very good artist. And so what he typically does is he will tack up a canvas onto a wall of his house, on the inside or the outside of his house, and over a period of several months, he will visit it occasionally whenever he feels the need to put something onto that canvas. And what he will, and so the result is after 5 or 6 months is really what it is. It's a visual diary of the things that he was thinking about, or concerned about, or vexed about, or laughing about, or perplexed about, that rose to a level of kind of height in him that he wanted to go and put that thought onto the canvas. The other end of the spectrum is Everall Brown, for instance. Everall Brown is because he had been a carpenter and he understood the idea of, he knew how to use jigs, he knew how if you're doing things that you have to make several parts, identical parts, where you know how to do it on a sort of a organized, mass-produced basis, so you can set up a jig and make 10 cut-out pieces of wood that you're going to have one in each section, that kind of an idea. And so he would do that. But then when he got to doing the real subject matter of the work, it would be quite quite individual on each one. None of them were anywhere near like the others. And they were all like Daly, whatever spiritual idea he wanted to depict in that particular one, he would depict. And often they were spiritual landscapes. So that's the type of work he would do, and his method was more organized. And Daly, on the other extreme, was very, very random, but the whole was a complete whole of a diary of his life during that time. A diary of his psyche, I should say, during that time. Ras Dizzy was a guy who was really homeless. Not really completely homeless, but I guess you would say he's itinerant. He didn't live in any one place for very long. He would live for a month in Kingston, and then he would go over to Montego Bay for 6 weeks, or go to Ocho Rios for 3 months, or go to Panama, or whatever, various places that he would travel around. And so he had no permanent home, and all his possessions he really carried with him. But he really wasn't homeless in the sense that he would always be able to find a place to live and stay with a friend. University professor sometime at the University of West Indies in Kingston would have him come in and stay with him for a while. And so he had friends. So and so what he would do was his style was to do one single subject, and to do it with fast broad strokes with complete color sense. So he was this raw expressionist artist, and would do these narrative depictions, or sometimes not narrative, but more of a spiritual sort of a psychological sort of a work. And on the back he would write a little story about it, and sometimes the words would have nothing to do with the subject matter. But here again, it was sort of by the time he got to writing something on the back, he was thinking about something else. So he would write a title that was a spiritual thought that he was having at the moment. It may or may not have been the thought he was having when he painted the other side of the work. So he would do racehorse scenes, incredible, beautiful scenes at a racetrack, and when the horse, this sort of a ghost-like horse, going over the finish line, with the crowd cheering, and the jockey riding on top. And then on the back, he would write a complete narration of the horse race, as if you heard it from the announcer in the stands, or if you heard it over the radio by somebody narrating that race, and he would write it all out and tell you the whole story of that particular race. I guess you would say I'm sort of an unofficial adjunct. Let me explain it. Fairly early on, after I had done some collecting, and my wife and I, when we came to Jamaica, we went 1 year to Ocho Rios, but then the subsequent years we went to Negril over the Christmas holidays, and then that's where we kept coming back every time. So after 3 or 4 years, then I finally went into Kingston, where the National Gallery of Jamaica is located, during the time that they were showing their annual national exhibition. And in the annual national exhibition, they have their works from their trained artists, as well as the intuitives, their self-taught artists. And I spent a lot of time that particular visit looking at the intuitive artists, because that's the ones that I was already focusing on and collecting, because the one exhibition that was going on when I was there was the intuitives in Harmony Hall, and so that's the ones I knew a little bit about. So I spent a lot of time looking at them, and then the deputy director, David Muir, saw me there, and then saw me still there, and and was curious. He came out and talked to me, and I mentioned that I had done it, and was collecting the artists, and that I was actually thinking quite seriously about doing it in a much more intense way, focusing on the intuitives. And so we met, and then the next trip to Kingston, I kept in touch with him, and then he agreed to take me around the island to visit all the artists, because most of them don't live in Kingston. They live way back up in the hills, or across the Wagwater River, where Woody lived up on a hillside. And so he knew them all and had visited them, and then took me to meet them and introduced me, and then basically I carried on after that. So basically, what the National Gallery did was say yes to my idea of being sort of their roving ambassador to the artists. They would go out and document them and visit them regularly, and try to keep track of the works and whatnot, and then build this sort of repository of their works, but also document them with audio tape and videotape and photography. And so they understood that they couldn't do that themselves, so they were very happy to take under wing this volunteer who would do that for them. And then from time to time, when they would then do exhibitions, they knew that they then could draw upon my resources to help them to have the intuitives well represented at the exhibition, that hadn't been collected, the works that hadn't been collected in Kingston. And then at the same time, because I had the collection grown pretty substantially, then there was requests for the collection to be shown in the United States. And so it all worked out very good for the National Gallery, because the works got shown in the United States, and then eventually in Europe and South America and Spain and various other places that the works from the collection have been exhibited at. So it was always informal, but it was always an idea that we were really sort of a partnership, that I would do all this, and that whatever time they needed anything from me, that I would help them out in whatever way I could. And so when they had the big Intuitives exhibition in 2006, then they were able to use some of the video, use a lot of the collection. I wrote one of the essays in the catalog for the exhibition. So we're sort of informal partners, helping each other whenever we need each other's help. Well, the reward, I think, the strongest reward comes from the time we spent with the artists. Most of these artists have a strong moral intelligence. They're very spiritual people. The religion they practice, or their ideas, aren't necessarily the ideas that I practice or that I hold sacred. But what I do admire is someone who has a capacity to live a very spiritual life, even if it isn't my religion. That doesn't matter. You're encountering someone who is a very humble person, with somebody who is probably a saint on earth in many cases, because of the life they lead, a very aesthetic life. And so anytime you encounter someone who is that strong, wonderful human being, you come away that day knowing a lot more than you did before you got to that person's house that day. You come back a richer person. So that's really why it was something you could do and not sort of get distracted from over the years, because it was a very rich way to lead a life, to be able to spend time with people like that. So that was part of it. Then the other part of it was the earliest professional career I had was as a newspaper reporter. So I had some skills and talent in being able to record people's, to be able to report on people and report on things like that. And so being able to document on all that was sort of drawing upon a skill that I had. So the other rewarding part of it was that here you got a middle-class couple from another country, United States, and literally, if you stick with it, you could, by being organized and serious about it, you could contribute to the cultural knowledge of another country. Amazing, amazing. But literally, we were able to do that. And then when the video got shown in Washington D.C., and then the reviewer there, the art critic there, said, "I get it, I understand it." Well, that's rewarding, because you help another part of the world understand sort of a rich spiritual and artistic life that goes on in the back hills of Jamaica, they would have no way of knowing or suspecting that rich cultural activities are going on. So you help create understanding amongst various people and various cultures. That's very rewarding. And then you get to look at all this great art all day long. So you surround yourself with things you love, and so I can't imagine a better way to have spent my time, our time in over those years than doing that. Then we would have gotten more pleasure or more satisfaction or deeper understanding of human nature than the way we did what we did. The first thing to do is to collect well. But the things that we did right were we focused. It occurred to us early on, as I say, that you can make a contribution to cultural knowledge, but only if we, given our resources and our time and everything, only if you do it in a small area, where you can really provide a lot of original information that otherwise would not have been gained. But if you try to do it on too broad a fashion, then you won't. It's too much for you to learn yourself, and so your contribution isn't going to be that strong. So if somebody does their collecting right and really collects it in a fashion that their collection would be able to provide a resource for a museum in that area of art, then by all means they should work with the museum to make it available, to work with the museum to make whatever, to do it systematically so that they can have good, accurate records about the works and the artists, so that the museums then can accurately then use it with confidence in the information you've gained. So yeah, it's if you're serious about it, that you should be doing that, because the museums are really the place where the venues where this work is really shared with the world, and you can help them do their job better than you've made a contribution. We started collecting it in the mid-1980s, and that now is about 27 years ago. I think that's about right. And so most of that period we were building the collection. We donated some things actually to the Frost Museum about 12 years ago. Some works of the Intuitives we developed, and so we wanted to sort of start a relationship. We wanted to do two things. We wanted to interest the museum in the work of these artists, and what better way than to have them have it as part of their collection? Then they're sort of bound to go find out who these people are. They're in our collection. We have to find out who they are. But I'm just kidding about that. But it was to help trigger an interest, yes, within a museum, and that seemed to be a very logical one. The other reason we knew about it is because some people we dealt with in this world of collection had very good relationships with the Frost, knew them to be a very, very thoughtful museum about their collections, and with an interest, a broader interest in other types of art other than what's typically collected in a university museum. So what we want to do now, the idea at this point is to have the works have a permanent home for the works in institutions that really would, in those institutions that would be very interested in this type of work, and would be willing to do the work of really understanding it and being able to do the work to be able to present it in a way that the public could come to it, to have a rich viewing of it and understanding of it. That's the goal, to be able to fulfill our mission, which was to be able to help advance the knowledge about the culture of a particular country, and do it in a way that is lasting, so that information is accessible, it's well organized, and the works are accessible. And so we have 5 hard years the collecting, the easy part's over. The collecting, now the hard part, which is organizing all this other material, is and working with various museums and donating works to their collection. That's various things.